Hello, my name is Aiden Perkins. I'm here at the South Fork Natural History Museum. I am presenting my talk, Hidden in Plain Sight, Long Island's Rare and Unusual Fish. I'll be talking about Long Island's cool species of fish you could find, including the tropical strays, which are always a rare and exciting sight. Come join us.
Hi, everyone. I'm Frank Covetto. I'm the Executive Director of the South Fork Natural History Museum. I want to welcome you all to another presentation of East End Environmental Lecture Series. Today, we have a very special guest, Aiden Perkins. Aiden is our Young Birders Club walk leader. He's also a very active naturalist here on Long Island. And today, he's going to present unusual and rare fish of Long Island. So we're really looking forward to having him do this presentation. So, Aiden, take it away. Welcome.
Thank you, Frank, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. Thanks for attending. Today, I'm going to be giving a presentation on Long Island's unusual and rare fish. And Hidden in Plain Sight is in the title because a lot of these are right under your feet, a lot of places you'll go. So I'm going to start by giving some background about myself. I'm 23 years old. I went to SUNY ESF. I grew up in Miller Place in Long Island on the North Shore, and I worked a lot of various jobs, usually bird survey jobs, but everything outdoors. This past summer, I was a park ranger at Wildwood State Park. My biggest hobbies are birding and fishing, but I've gotten into moths and herping, which is looking for reptiles and amphibians recently. And I'll preface this by saying all the photos in this presentation were taken by me on Long Island. So some more background. I grew up a birder. This is my home patch outside Sinai Harbor. This is where I grew up from a very young age and learned all about birds and wildlife, fish, and everything. I spent a lot of time in the woods, in the environment, and this is kind of the area that built the person I am today. So I started back in the day when I was 11 years old birding, and most people, they like to go just enjoy watching birds. But one day when I was playing hooky from school and I was home, I found this Bohemian waxwing in my backyard. And Bohemian waxwings are a very rare species of bird on Long Island. They're not seen in New York State or Long Island every year. So when I found this bird and posted it, all these birders were interested and wanted to come and see it. So over a course of a few days, I had about 50 birders come into my backyard to see this bird. And that experience really set off my naturalist life and finding rare species. So when I went to school up at ESF in 2020, I got into fishing a lot, and I wanted to find what fish inhabit New York State. So I took a trip to Western New York, and I found this silver chub. And what I didn't realize at the time of catching it, this silver chub hadn't been recorded in New York State for 100 years. They've been extirpated from pollution. Getting these populations of silver chub to leave New York State waters. You could find them on the opposite side of Lake Erie, but not in New York State anymore. So this find was really cool, and it was my first really rare fish that I ever found. And then just recently, I've been getting into moths. So this summer, I set up a moth flight in my backyard and found this mourning underwing. And on iNaturalist, mourning underwing has never been reported in Suffolk County. So that was my first rare moth that I ever found. So as you can tell, I like to find rare species. And speaking of iNaturalist, it's where I post all my fish and all my moths and everything I find in nature. As iNaturalist kind of has rankings of people who identify species. So in New York State, I've found the most species of fish, and that's 222 species. And I'm very proud of that milestone. I got that about 2 years ago. So getting into the fish, I've kind of broken up the fish into 4 categories. Those categories are the resident marine species. These are fish that are saltwater species that are here all year round. they are the expected Long Island fish. When you think of Long Island fish, that's what you'd expect. Then the freshwater, those just have freshwater species. About half of them are invasive. We don't have a ton of freshwater species, but we do have a lot of cool ones. The seasonal visitors, these are fish that mainly only visit for the summer. We do have a bunch of northern species that come and visit in the winter, but they are expected on Long Island, but do not stay year-round. And then the tropical strays. They are a very special group of fish. They are drifted up from waters way down in the Caribbean, Florida, South America. These are very rare fish to find, and I'll talk a lot more in depth about them. You can see there's some examples of these fish on the bottom. The smooth puffer, flying gurnard, and big eye, the tropical strays. Then you have our local northern puffer and the cunner down in the end. So I'm going to pretty quickly go through the freshwater species of fish. We have a lot of different ecosystems in our freshwaters on Long Island. We have streams, rivers, creeks, ponds, lakes. So we could really host a variety of freshwater species. Here's the two popular examples that you'll find in almost any freshwater body. This is like the main predator on Long Island, the largemouth bass, and the main freshwater bait fish, the banded killifish. Most freshwater wetlands on Long Island are managed by DEC, and a lot of the species of freshwater fish we have been introduced for insect control, for sport fishing. So there's a lot of ways these fish have gotten here, and I'll go through a few more of those right now. So here's kind of the full list of the freshwater fish on Long Island, broken up into native and introduced. All these introduced species were generally introduced by people one way or the other. These fish aren't crossing from inland New York to Long Island on their own accord usually. The native species we have, there's a lot of really cool species, like you see in the top right, the pirate perch and tessellated darter. Those are a couple of my favorite freshwater fish that are native here. These are common fish to find in the Connecticut River and Carmen's River. And then on the bottom, we have the oriental weatherfish, which is a fish native to East Asia, but was introduced to Lake Ronkonkoma one way or the other. Someone had it as a pet and released it there. And now there's a population that is doing very well. And you can go to Lake Ronkonkoma and find weatherfish pretty often. So then a lot of the cool freshwater species we have make migrations. So these are diadromous species of fish, which means they migrate between freshwater and saltwater through their lives, typically to breed in one or the other environment. Usually our fish are breeding in our freshwaters, then migrating back out to saltwater. The most popular example of this is the American eel. These American eels are born in the Sargasso Sea, which is a region in the southern Atlantic. No one's ever documented American eels breeding with each other in the Sargasso Sea. All we know is they head out that way and the juveniles come out of there. And then they migrate all up our coast and find any way they can into our freshwater systems and grow up in our freshwater and brackish creeks, and eventually will migrate back out to the ocean to go breed in the Sargasso Sea. And then the three-spine stickleback is one of my favorite diadromous species we have. They make a similar migration to the American eel. They migrate into our freshwater creeks to breed and then leave into the ocean most of the year. Three-spine stickleback are fairly common on Long Island, but they're hard to run into because they're usually in deeper water and they spend a very short period of time here. But they are a very cool species, as well as the 4-spine and 9-spine stickleback. All three of these species are very cool, unique fish that you can't really find in a lot of places easily, but Long Island, they are all here, and 4-spine and 9-spine can be very abundant in certain spots. The 9-spine is a freshwater specialist. You'll almost always find them in freshwater, and 4-spine is usually you can find them in saltwater, brackish, freshwater, basically anywhere. So then getting into the saltwater fish, I've got to mention the popular game fish. 90% of fishermen on Long Island, when they go fishing, they're going for one of these 5 species. The striped bass, bluefish, summer flounder, black sea bass, and porgy also. Their correct name is scup. As you'll notice, besides maybe the striped bass, all these other fish are very small, and most people would want to boast and brag about their large catches, like their massive bluefish they catch. I don't catch a lot of big fish because I focus on multi-species. And to catch the most species, you want to be fishing for small fish because a lot more species of fish get to smaller sizes at their max length than the few that get massive. And all the fish that do get massive were all small at one point. So I'm always fishing for the most species of fish I can. So I'm typically not catching very large species. And here's kind of like the first group of our saltwater fishes. These are the native ones. These pretty much spend the entire year on Long Island. Some of them might go a little deeper, some a little offshore, but generally you could find these species, or it wouldn't be surprising to find these species in most months of the year. Fish like the tautog and cunner, they are here. They basically don't move. They spend their entire lives at the same spots, but then species like the blueback herring and alewife will make some migrations, but you could find them in most months. So getting into the flatfishes, these are the flounders. I've found 5 species of flatfish on Long Island, and these are really cool fish, very underrated fish. When they're born, they swim vertically and have one eye in each side of their face. And as their larval stage grows up, their one eye migrates to the other side of their head and they begin to lay flat on the ground. These are camouflage specialist fish. You find them buried in the sand with just their eyes sticking out. And all these are super fun to run into, and all these are very common on Long Island. So you could find all of these species in most saltwater habitats on the south and north shore. Here's our killiefishes. These are kind of what people consider as the bait fish. I love killifish. A lot of them exhibit very bright colors. The striped killifish is sexually dimorphic. So that means the male and female have different color patterns. The female on the left has horizontal stripes and spots, while the male on the right has vertical bars and will show a black spot on the back of its dorsal fin. The sheep's head minnow gets very colorful. They could have neon blue on their head and pink on their chin. The spot fin killifish is probably my favorite killifish that I found on Long Island. They're a very rare species of fish to kind of run into because they live in a specific habitat called the high marsh. And the high marsh is a place that the tide only hits on full moons. So it's the max high tide will reach these pools in the high salt marsh where these killifish live. So to find these, I went out into the marsh at night, had to walk about 3 miles, fell in a lot of marsh holes, but it was a very fun experience. And eventually I got out there and I found them. And there's been very few records of the species on Long Island just because of how difficult they are to run into and how specific their habitat is, which salt marsh, high marsh specifically, is a declining habitat. So these spot-fin killifish are attributed with salt marsh sparrows because they both live in the same habitat and they both need marsh that isn't getting flooded often because the salt marsh sparrows will nest on the ground and their nests will get flooded. So spot-fin killifish and salt marsh sparrow are both declining at a rate consistent with our salt marsh's decline. These are the clupiforms, which are just the shads and herrings. We have a lot of species that you could find on Long Island here. They're usually pretty tough to identify. There's always identification challenges when it comes to them. So I always like to talk about them a little bit just because a lot of these fish that I catch aren't bright and obvious. A huge factor in looking for variety of species of fish is identification. You would sometimes spend just as much time identifying fish as you do trying to catch them. So in the corner over there, you see the blueback herring pectoral fin rays. Typically, a way of identifying a lot of fish is counting their fin rays, which you see I have the fin kind of expand, and you see each one of those lines creates a ray on the fin, and fish that look nearly identical, like the Atlantic herring and blueback herring, could be easily told apart by counting their fin rays. But these are the bait fish of the saltwater. You find menhaden everywhere, bay anchovy everywhere. These are the fish that all the predators are eating. So then these are just some of the miscellaneous like native saltwater species. A lot of these I think are really cool. The striped cusk eel is a nocturnal species that spends its day buried in the sand. I think they're really a really cool species because similar to birds, they find their mates by singing and they defend territory by singing. So they have an organ that allows them to make a drumming sound underwater, and they kind of tell the other cusk eels, this is my territory, and defend that territory by making noise, which is not something you'd really expect from a fish. And when researchers are researching them, they don't go drag nets looking for them. They set out speakers on the ocean floor and listen to them and determine the populations based on how many they hear in a given area. And the pipefish related to seahorses, extremely abundant species of fish on Long Island, and a very cool and unique one. When you go seining, you find a lot of pipefish. You find them in every saltwater habitat on Long Island. And then the American monkfish, this was just a really cool, unusual fish that I was able to find. Usually you would find adults being caught by fishermen off Montauk, for example. They're a little deeper water fish. But I was lucky enough to find a juvenile that got drifted inshore. And they are a very famous food fish. So a lot of people like to eat monkfish. So now I'm going to get into the tropical strays and the seasonal visitors. So the lines between a native fish and a visitor and a tropical stray get very blurry. There's never going to be a way to be sure a fish is getting here accidentally and like coming here and succumbing to the cold or migrating back down south. We'll never know in a lot of cases, and these scenarios are always changing. So what the case might have been for some species like 100 years ago might be different now, and species with climate change are moving north. So the environment is constantly changing. But so as far as the tropical strays, they don't get here by accident. They don't just arrive here for no reason. They only arrive here because of the Gulf Stream, which is a current of water that runs up the east coast of North America and then crosses across the Atlantic. And this current brings warm water up from the Caribbean up our coast. And because of Long Island's geography, how it kind of sticks out, sometimes these warm coral rings, they're called, will break off the Gulf Stream containing some fish eggs or larval fish that it brought with it and drift into Long Island because we stick out so far. And this is how all of these tropical strays get here. If this current went further offshore or it didn't exist, we wouldn't get any of these southern species that we find. So the seasonal fate of the tropical strays is always in question. We know species like the spot-fin butterfly fish are not strong swimmers. They get drifted up, arrive here as larvae, and grow up during our summer the most they can, but then once it gets cold, they will perish. And there's been very few studies up to date about the fate of these tropicals and the pattern of their movements. But one of the ones that was done determined that the spot fin butterfly fish does not make it out of our waters. But then species like the crevalle, many might consider the crevalle a tropical stray. This species that we never see the adults of in our waters, that is a southern fish you find in Florida and the Caribbean, but we get them the same time we get these other tropicals. But the difference is the crevalle arrive like by the end of the summer, we see them in such numbers, and we don't find all these dead crevalle once it gets cold. These fish have a body form that allows them to make a migration back down south. And there's been one study with them up to date, and that determined that crevalle, at least most of them, migrate back down south with back to their usual waters and reconnect with their breeding populations. And that study to confirm that basically trawled up bluefish, which is a fish that makes this annual migration from Florida to Long Island every year, and they visit us in the summer. They found crevalle going south with bluefish. So that basically confirmed our suspicions that these fish are making it out of our waters. And maybe it's not an accident that they get here. Maybe they are breeding closer than we think. There's so many unknowns with the tropical strays, and that's what kind of makes it really exciting. So here's my list of, I know a better way of saying it, but iffy tropicals. These are like kind of the seasonal visitors that they might get here based like from the current, the Gulf Stream drifting them up and getting dropped here by accident, or maybe like a lot of these fish like the amberjacks get here naturally, like they're born in a region where they're going to be drifted up here, and all of them make it back down south, and it's kind of part of their normal life cycle. But all these species are just very up in the air and could be swayed both ways. We do have species like bonito and Spanish mackerel that are just seasonal visitors. We know they come here for food resources and leave, but there's always so many questions with all of these species and what they actually do in the winter and how they get here. So here's our blennies. On the left, we have the crested blenny. This is one of those arguably tropical species that might only arrive here by accidentally getting drifted up the Gulf Stream and getting thrown here. Maybe they all died in the winter. Same thing with striped blenny. It could be the same case, but we just don't know. We don't find dead blennies in the winter all that much. We don't see them slowly getting colder. They just kind of disappear. The feather blenny is its own case. They spend the summers here on Long Island, and what is thought is that they just move to deeper water where they survive over the winter and then just come back into shallower water in the spring. But like the other two blennies, they just kind of disappear. And these aren't fish that are going to make some big journey. But if they were succumbing to the cold every winter, we would find them in late fall, slow, like acting very slow and lethargic, but we don't. So they're definitely making some movement that gets them out of here. So here are the jacks. The jacks, the Carangidae family, is the most represented family of fish on Long Island, and none of them are considered a native Long Island fish. So what that means is you could find more species of fish within the jack family than any other family of fish in like the world. You could find up to over 20 species of jacks on Long Island, and every single one of them is either a seasonal visitor or a tropical stray. But like I said before, the crevalle and even the banded rudderfish, which are like in the amberjack family, they might not be tropical strays. They might the juveniles coming here and migrating back down south might just be a part of their natural life cycle, and we might have to consider them different. A big reason that I care about how we consider these fish of tropical strays or native is native fish get regulations. Tropical fish don't. So if fish are coming here, and migrating back to their breeding populations. If those populations aren't doing well, they should be regulated on Long Island when currently all of these tropicals are not. And you could take as many as you want and do whatever you want with them. The scads are some of my favorite. They come most summers, but these are the three common species. They all look very similar, but they're just a common bait fish, and they're a lot of fun to catch on small little hooks. And here's some more just miscellaneous seasonal visitors, iffy tropicals. A lot of these are just really unique fish, like the half-beak. It's a very cool looking fish. It's in the same family as the ballyhoo, which is a common bait fish in Florida. The darter goby, their population range is listed as north as southern Massachusetts. So they get up here consistently and we don't find them succumbing to the cold. How does a fish that small, and this is like their max size, and they are benthic, so they live on the bottom, how does a fish that small make it back down south? Who knows? But for some reason, or one way or the other, they leave here. And then great triggerfish is the prime example of tropicals that should be considered native and get regulations because of that. The great triggerfish in Florida are regulated during their breeding season. You can't catch great triggerfish when they're breeding. And when we get them on Long Island every summer, there is no regulation. They're not considered a Long Island fish, so they don't have regulation. So you can keep as many as you want. So maybe those rules need to change, because if their populations aren't doing well in Florida and they are regulated down there, and these two populations through migration are connected, ours should be regulated as well. So now getting into what I call like pure tropical fish. These, we really don't find any large individuals of these in our waters. They are very inconsistent every year, which would encourage that they are kind of getting here accidentally. A big factor of how tropical fish get to Long Island is recruitment of that species in the area they bred. So if, let's say, like African pompano or red snapper had a really good breeding year off of Florida, then we might get a lot of them. There's so many factors that depend on what we get and how many we get, but the inconsistency in fish, like these species showing up every year, really just kind of supports the fact that they are probably getting here very much on accident, and a lot of these don't make it out of our waters. These species in the box are kind of an exception to like what all these other fish are. Excuse me. All these fish, we see a lot of them, lots of years, and like the snowy grouper, for example, we see about every year, and we don't find them succumbing to the cold in the winter. And their breeding populations and their most northern populations are not that far from us. While maybe a lot of these species which live from like the Carolinas south, maybe the ones we get aren't coming from their most northern population, but they might be able to reconnect with them, and they definitely have more of a cold tolerance than a lot of these like damselfish and butterfly fish. But every species of tropical fish has their own story and their own reason to think one way or the other of what gets them here, how long are they here, and are they making it out. So the orange filefish, this is one of the species in that box. We find these juvenile orange filefish most years. They are really cool because as an act of like camouflage, they will sit kind of facing straight down, like they're kind of sitting vertically to look like a leaf in the water. So sometimes when you see them, you don't think it's a fish, and you look closer and you could still not really tell what it is, and then you realize it's an orange filefish just drifting, facing straight down. Now, originally, these like a filefish isn't a fish you think of as a Long Island fish, and originally we considered these pure tropical strays, like no way these orange filefish that don't have populations anywhere north of like South Carolina are getting here on purpose or making it out. But recently, we've observed orange filefish at near their max size, which is in the picture of the one I'm holding. We've seen schools of orange filefish near max size schooling up near our inlets in late summer, like early fall, as the water is starting to get colder, and evidently moving out of the inlet in schools, which is a behavior that is very indicative of these fish about to make some migration, them schooling up in schools of 30 plus. So there's all these questions that we're always trying to answer about tropical fish. And orange filefish, specifically in the filefish family, they live a drifting lifestyle. So they do spend most of their time, at least in the southern waters, they spend most of their time kind of drifting around the ocean with vegetation that's like sargassum weed and floating structure, but they spend a lot of their time drifting on the ocean, and that lifestyle that they have could help them make a migration like that, or give them like a better chance at making a migration back down south, as other filefish, like plainhead filefish, which we find on Long Island, don't live a drifting lifestyle, and they surely succumb to the cold every year. So then here's two more species in the jack family. These were once considered like pure tropical strays, but these thoughts are being questioned now. I find look down that size, which is about like half of adult size, in big schools in the fall, and they just disappear. Like we don't find cold stunned look downs. There's a spot where there's a warm water treatment plant on Long Island, and every fall we get schools of these look downs there that show up with crevalle jacks and a lot of these other species that are making migrations back down south, but might have just got stuck in this warm water area because the water was getting too cold too quick. And instead of leaving, they got stuck in the treatment plant and will maybe succumb there over the winter. But there's a lot of things that could indicate that look down might be making it back every year, and they aren't a pure tropical. The juveniles are really cool. They have these long streamers that come off their body. That's pretty much used to imitate floating grass. If you ever run into one of those, looking around docks or anything, you will have to look twice to spot it because they look like a bunch of grass floating. And they're usually around the grass. And then the permit, similar case to the look down, they are fast growing. They do have a pretty like northern range, like well into North Carolina. But they're part of the jack family. They have the body form and ability to migrate back down south, and we get them very consistently every year. So these are getting into some more of the pure tropicals that are really rare and we don't get every year. So the short big eye is probably the limit of tropical fish that you could think might make it back down south. Short big eye are typically found around 200 meters deep. They are deep water fish. That's why they're red in color, have large eyes. They're used to environments with no light. We get a lot of them every year, and we don't usually find, it'd be very rare to find a cold stunned short big eye. But a few years ago, one adult was trolled off the continental shelf, like well off our shores, but within range of Long Island. And if adults are being are living on the continental shelf in deep water where there's very little fishing or trawling being done. Maybe our short big eyes are making it out and surviving to adulthood. That's very different than the glass eye, which this is a usually shallow water reef species. They are very rare on Long Island. We do not get these every year. So this is a much more likely just pure random tropical stray that is probably not making it back. But short big eye, on the other hand, lots of questions to be answered. So then I've been talking a lot about species that might make it back. These species do not. These angelfish, damselfish, and butterfly fish, we have a handful of each group. We have like a handful of angelfish, handful of species of damselfish, and a handful of species of butterfly fish. These fish are shallow reef species. When they arrive here, they set up a territory and don't really leave that territory. And eventually, once the waters get cold, you could go and watch them every day. As the water slowly gets colder, they slow down more until they get diseases and will slowly die. But when people go looking for tropicals, this is usually what they want to find. They want to find these brightly colored reef species, which typically are very rare. Spotfin butterfly fish are, for some reason, a very special case. We get a lot of them every year. They are actually probably the most common tropical fish to find on Long Island. But then you have like the blue angelfish and the bicolored damselfish. These are a lot more rare. These you might find one or two a year if you're lucky, and you look a lot. But all these are always a blast to find on Long Island, to lean over a dock on the South Shore and see butterfly fish and angelfish is like surreal. To have that experience on Long Island, it's just crazy that you could find these fish consistently. Like I said in the beginning, every year is very different. Most years, blue angelfish are really rare. There's two other species of angelfish that are almost always really rare. But last year, 2024, was a very good year for tropicals. That probably was due to some big warm core rings being drifted into our waters. One way or the other, we had a certain storm system or something that pushed a lot of fish into us. And blue angelfish were extremely apparent last year. There was a dock in Moriches that I went to, and you would look over the side of the dock along the wall, and you would see like 30 blue angelfish in just one area. You would see more angelfish and damselfish and butterfly fish than you would native species by far. It'd be hard to find it was hard to find native species at that spot because of how many of these angelfish there were. It was an insane experience that is extremely rare, but typically they're very hard to find. So this is probably one of my favorite tropicals I've found. The flying gurnard. They're bottom-dwelling fish. They're kind of similar to our sea robins that we have on Long Island, as they have these large wings that they'll fan out when a predator is nearby, or they'll fan them out to get some prey to spook from under the sand. They're a pretty rare fish, though their appearance on Long Island is consistent. There's usually at least one found every year. These are also very popular in the aquarium trade. They are known to jump out of tanks, so you need a lid on your tank, but people pay a lot of money for this fish. They're gorgeous, and when I found this, I was freaking out. But they're super cool. They have these little hooks on the next to their head, and kind of can't really see us on the bottom of their wing, but they crawl along the bottom like our sea robins and look for food. So here's the snappers. If you go to Florida, then one of the most common game fish there is mangrove snapper. We get pretty consistent mangrove snappers every year, almost consistent enough to hint that maybe they're not a tropical stray as much as we think. Maybe a lot of them make it back, but there's a lot of unknowns with that species. I found three species of snapper in the mangroves genus, which was the mangrove, the dog snapper, and then schoolmaster snapper. I found all those three species on Long Island, which all those three are very popular game fish in Florida. The vermilion snapper is a special case, though. I found this a few years ago over in Shinnecock Bay. And as far as I'm aware, and anyone I've talked to, this is probably the first record of the species in New York State. In Florida, they're a deep water species that is targeted regularly from boats, but we have not. The vermilion snapper has not been recorded in New York, as far as my knowledge, previously. So finding that was a really cool find, and it goes to show that you never know what you'll find every year. Like every few years, someone finds something that's new to New York State. So it's always super exciting to go out. And I found that at a spot I go to all the time, and just one day it was there. So it's always fun going out looking. So the groupers, for me, these are probably the most fun species of tropical fish to find on Long Island because I can catch them on rod and reel easily. They're very aggressive, large mouths. So I can use very little jigs, like 1 inch long. And once they grow to this size, which only takes a couple months, so by late August, they're usually around that size, I can catch a lot of them pretty regularly on a good year. Last year was a very good year. And as you can see, I was finding tons of groupers. This year, very bad year. Very few have been found. But the groupers, just like a lot of the fish I've been talking about, are also a special case because they might not all be tropical strays that don't make it back. The snowy grouper have populations off the continental shelf, off New Jersey, and there's a good chance that our snowy groupers might find their way out and connect with the ones off New Jersey. We don't know, but we do see groupers schooling up in the end of the season. So on a good grouper year in October, you can go near the inlets, and I catch them on hook and line, which is probably the easiest way to encounter them. I will catch one after the other, and which scuba divers have confirmed that they are in large schools underwater, which anywhere else you go, Florida, Carolinas, anywhere else that has groupers, you will never see one grouper next to each other. They're extremely territorial and aggressive towards each other. So seeing that behavior on Long Island is so indicative that some big movement is about to happen. They're right near the inlets in big schools, and then a couple weeks later, they're gone. So it's a very exciting phenomenon that there needs to be a lot of research done. Snowy groupers populations are very highly regulated from Florida north, as well as red groupers and scamp groupers. Pretty much all grouper populations, mainly in Florida and the Carolinas, they're highly regulated. You cannot catch them besides in certain seasons and at certain sizes. But on Long Island, you can catch as many as you want, and you can keep them all, you can kill them all, you can do whatever you want. So maybe these fish need some regulation if they are making it back down south. Lionfish. Most people will be alarmed to see that we have lionfish on Long Island after hearing what the damage they've done in the Florida reefs. They're invasive from the Indo-Pacific to the Atlantic. Luckily, we don't have to worry about lionfish on Long Island. It's good that they get drifted up here because they do not survive our winters, and they will die once it gets too cold. And they are venomous, so don't hold them like I was. I was being careful. African pompano, super cool tropical stray. They could grow up to 50 pounds and 5 feet long, and their range is, if you basically just drew a line across the world's equator, that's their range. So once they grow larger, they lose these long streamers, and they uh become they're in the jack family, so they're a very fast swimming fish, and they can travel long, long distances. They're very popular game fish when they are adults, but seeing this species on Long Island is always crazy because with these long streamers, they look like a jellyfish underwater. So you'll see one or two of them swimming, and it looks like fake. It looks like you've found some crazy thing that's never been described before. But sure enough, it's African pompanos, and they're really not all that rare. Every year, I hear a good handful of people that have seen them or found them. And do they make it out? Do they not? We don't know. The African pompanos generally disappear from an area after some point. Um, but yeah, it's a lot of questions, and these guys are always fun to encounter. So how do I find a lot of these fish? Um, the term of the method I usually use is called microfishing. It's using very, very small hooks, very small rigs, very small weights to try to catch these fish on hook and line. Using nets, seine nets, dip nets, that is a very good method, and you will catch a lot. Seine nets can be destructive to eelgrass beds, which is why I prefer not to use them. And dip nets, it can be really hard to catch a quick angelfish with a net when it's seeing you coming. So typically, I'll try to catch them on hook and line, and I'll use a little tiny piece of shrimp or whatever bait I can find. And like I said, with the groupers, they're really aggressive. So a lot of these fish, it'd be really easy to catch them on hook and line compared to trying to net them. There's a thousand ways you can microfish. One time when I was upstate New York, you could kind of use like any bait, and I didn't have any bait, and I couldn't find a worm, which is the typical freshwater microfishing bait. So I ripped a piece of skin off my toe, and I used that as bait, and I caught a fish. And it worked. It worked great. It was awesome. So you always have bait on you. But yeah, it's very accessible. You really only need a stick, a little bit of line, and a small hook, and you could go catch small fish. It's a lot of sight fishing. So sometimes you're kind of dropping down blindly baits into an area you can't see and catching fish. But most of the time, it's sight fishing. So like the African pompano, for example, I see one swimming on the top of the water, and then I'll take out my microfishing rig, my rod, and I'll put bait in front of its face, and then hopefully it'll be hungry and bite the hook and I can catch it. And it's always a blast because anywhere you go, if there's water, freshwater salt, you could always find some minnow, some species to catch. And I love it because every fish at some point is going to be very small. So you can basically catch any fish species you want with microfishing, while most species of fish don't grow more than like 6 or so inches. But yeah, it's very accessible to anyone trying to get into fishing. It's almost guaranteed success a lot of time. When if you go for keeper fluke, you might not catch any keeper fluke, but you'll always catch short fluke. So if you want to catch fish, microfishing is the way to go. And then just to conclude, I've talked a lot about regulations and conservation, and that is a very important part of the whole tropical fish phenomenon, that we aren't just assuming everything that gets here dies. These fish, if they return to their breeding populations down south, the numbers that come to Long Island could be a vital part of those populations, and we shouldn't take it lightly that people could go catch as many groupers as they want here, even if they're small, when they're highly regulated down south. Understanding the patterns of these fish and finding juveniles on Long Island is very important to science, because a lot of these fish, like the short big eye, for example, you don't really find juveniles in the areas you usually find short big eye. Usually you'll catch adult big eyes off of Florida on a boat, but it's very hard to find a juvenile. But we get them every year on Long Island. So if someone want to study any of these species, usually you start by looking at juveniles, and Long Island's a great place to find a lot of these juveniles. It's just very inconsistent. And then back to kind of the freshwater fish concept. Long Island has a lot of river systems that allow fish like American eel, alewife, the three-spined stickleback to migrate in and out of our freshwater to breed. And it's very important that we provide fish passages at dams in these rivers so these fish could actually complete their migration and breed successfully. Blydenburg State Park or Blydenburg County Park, recently the dam broke there, and now it's basically returned to its original state where these fish now have access to go migrate up and down the river like they used to before the dam was there. So people are trying to get Blydenburg to not make that dam again and to leave it as it is for the fish, because that's how it should be. So there's always ways we can increase our ecosystem health with all the pollution and the overdevelopment that all these fish are facing. And that's about it. Thank you all for attending.
Coffees.
Yeah.
For the high saltbar species that you talked about before, like the spot eater plate,
Yeah, spot plate.
where do they go when it's not like peak tide?
There's little marsha pools. So it's like these little tiny pools that are up in high marsh that only get filled like once a month. They could dry out, and if they do, the killifish will bury themselves in the mud. They could survive for a few days like that on the feed, but typically the marsh pools stay with at least a little bit of water. The killifish, it could breathe air, so they don't need well oxygenated water. It could be some stagnant pool that hasn't not water a while.
Yep. I recall when I was younger, we had a 10-gallon fish tank, and I saw an angelfish, which we had the thing. We had guppies, we had swordfish, and I remember a neon fish. So I never really realized that maybe they were coming up here, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, you find any fish on Long Island, any saltwater fish that ranges from like basically Long Island to the Caribbean, you could find wow, it's not out of like the possibilities. There's been a ton of species that have shown up that have just baffled collectors. Well, so it's always exciting to go look, because you never know when the days that you're going to find a new species for New York, new species for the Northeast. So a lot to find, and it takes a lot of looking, but it's always worth it.
When found the angelfish, said like have like a lot of them. Did you keep some for the tank or?
Some people did. I know others that did. I personally didn't. I don't have any tanks of my own. Just because I spend so much time outside that I don't have time to. I'll keep them when I'm home. But yeah, typically all the angelfish and butterfly fish and damselfish that I find, if I can get my hands on them, I'm going to try to give it to someone that wants it, because they're just going to die in the winter.
And you know how long they survived in the tank?
They can survive till adulthood if they're kept well. In the tank area here at SoFo, we have a blue angel that was found like on the tropical strays, and it was probably found maybe like a couple inches long, and now it's grown like triple the size. It's doing great. Yeah, they have a lot of the tropical fish that I've talked about in those tanks. As you see, like they're growing, and a lot of them are bigger than you'd ever find on water.
And the other thing, it's like in the beginning you show like the bird and the moth they were found in your backyard. Can I have a tour in your backyard? You can find kind of different, hairy species over there.
Well, I mean, I'll say with the moths.
I think you're lucky. Your backyard.
No, I love my backyard. I definitely am very fortunate to live where I live. But I will say, like, with the moths, if you have any groupings of trees in your backyard, any vegetation, you could find at least a few hundred species of moths over like a few like outings of putting up a light and identifying ones that comes with the light. Like the diversity of moths is just insane. Like you could find so much in a small area over the course of a year for a few years. But there's nothing really special about my backyard besides like I live really close to the North Shore. Birds and other things like to travel along coastlines.
Probably your backyard is the root for now.
Yeah, it's definitely I've got a lot of good things in my backyard, but everywhere on Long Island have really cool stuff.
Yeah. And you catch most of these fish with a net, I guess, or by hand, but
Like I catch a lot of them hook and line.
oh, because I mean, the small fish you catch with,
Yeah, even with small fish. Yeah, I mean I have hooks that are like this big.
oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, it like I said, it's all sight fishy too with the small fish. Like I'm not just dropping this tiny little bait somewhere hoping I catch the one I want. I'm looking for these fish first with my eyes, and once I see the fish I want to catch, right, then I get my gear ready and then I present to it and I try to catch it.
Wow, okay.
But I like to catch them as many as I can hook and line because I have like my own hook and line life list, like how birders have like their life list of birds, every bird they've ever seen. Fishermen have like a life list of every fish they've caught on hook and line.
Wow.
So I prefer to catch them on hook and line, but a lot of the fish could be very difficult. So in those cases, I'll just net them. That's usually after like 3 hours of trying to get that little 2-inch fish to bite, which is a little frustrating.
Yeah.
Do you have any initiatives or like programs that you are interested in or support for like amateur archaeologists or other people who want to fit on the conservation of Kippakas? Or like even just like, anti-down?
This ski tuck organization is, I believe, the ones fighting the Blydenburg Dam. They're the ones that John Turner, he's the one that is leading the effort to not have that dam rebuilt. I don't know any other organizations, particularly besides them, that are currently making any efforts, but the CTUC organization, John Turner, would definitely be my start of going for conservation. He's a guy, he knows it all.
Yeah. When you're like micro fishing with the hooks, is it like always a clean bite, or does that sometimes not go the way you want?
What do you mean?
Like when the fish bites the hook, is it usually like easy to remove and still survive, like all fine, or is
Yeah, so usually you when you watch it eat, you can kind of set it immediately so you're not swallowing the hook or anything. But sometimes, especially in like blind fishing, a lot of the smaller fish might end up swallowing the hook, and a lot of the small fish are boon sensitive, so they might die quickly out of water. And in those cases, I'll revert to normal fisherman techniques and use that dead fish for bait. But I'll say like, the microfishing could be extremely frustrating when going for these little fish, like the vermilion snapper. It was sitting in the corner of this little marina, just chilling in the water column, and I tried maybe 10 different baits over about, I think it was 2.5 hours of me leaning over and putting the bait from the fish's face and him deciding to come close, then backing off and maybe pecking at it and then swimming around. And it's just like over and over and over again until finally they just eat the whole thing. And then once they do that, your reaction time has to be quick. So if your reaction time is quick, then you get to set the hook. And then it might just fall up the hook because these are very light fish. And there's no like real setting the hook well into their mouth, and it doesn't stick usually very well if it's a very small fish. Kind of more flinging it out of the water sometimes that actually like hooking it. It's never a fight with that microfishing. Yeah.
you ever use like traps?
Like fish traps? I have not, but I know some people that do, and they do catch like groupers and butterfly fish sometimes. I think setting fish traps will be soon in my arsenal of tropo fish searching. Just because it's nice, you can kind of set it out there, come back on it, like double kai. Yeah.
What do you like more, birding or fishing?
Sorry to say, the Gurdon. The nice about birding is you can always go see a lot of birds, but you can't always go catch a lot of fish. So You can cut bird anywhere, you can't fish it anywhere.
Yep. Any thoughts on the effects I hear lately about the windows and the fish?
Yeah, so short-term high true with repetition, maybe perhaps short-term effects are fishermen and having a blast fishing on a structure. Like now there's a bunch of new structure that all these fish are kind of living on. Oh, and that's like good in the short term, but in the long term, with kind of windmills eventually breaking down or getting decommissioned, it's just a lot of trash in the ocean. And the windmills are made of like fiberglass and stuff. But if one of them breaks, it's a million tiny pieces of plastic now in the ocean, which is.
So I still know about the electricity, see underneath this stuff, like the sonar with the whales or not.
Yeah, maybe marine mammals will avoid the windmills because of the noise.
Oh,
I think that would be the biggest effect is just area avoiding them because of noise. I sharks don't avoid them, but the whales do to a point. But I don't. At least so far, there's not any like crazy effects for fish as far as the windmills.
Great. Thank you.